This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs the Playbook, and I have one of my heroes, Deepak Chopra. He is the founder of the Chopra Foundation, Chopra Global. He is one of the world's greatest icons, educators, teachers, and students. And I am just humbled to have him on the playbook to teach us here in this compressed time of uncertainty, accelerated change. Deepak Chopra, welcome to the playbook.
Thank you, David. Nice to be with you.
Very nice to see you. I believe that there's nothing different about this time other than acceleration, that there's always uncertainty, there's always change. Human nature never changes itself. And so I wanted to have someone with a deep understanding and perspective to help people have and share that understanding. As we go through these times, what comes to mind as most important to focus in on?
The most important thing to focus on will be different for different people. So for me at this moment, it is why do we take existence for granted? I've never taken existence for granted. My grandfather passed away when I was 6 years of age, suddenly after a celebration. And they took him to cremation grounds, brought him back as a bunch of ashes in a little jar. And at the age of 6 years, I had my first existential crisis. I didn't know what happened. Where did he go? He was there yesterday, and today he had disappeared. So, I've been on this quest all my life. I went to medical school, took training, etc. And I'm actually shocked in a way that people aren't perpetually surprised that they exist. I mean, if you were perpetually surprised that you exist, you would be grateful for it, and you would choose every experience as a very precious opportunity to enhance your experience of who you are. This is the biggest mystery. Why is there existence? No one can tell you, nor can anybody tell you why is there awareness of existence, because number one, there's existence. Number two, we are aware that there is existence. And if we weren't, then for practical matters, there wouldn't be any existence. So awareness of existence are the same thing. If there's existence outside of awareness, it's unknowable. This is a big adventure right now to find meaning for our existence, because what humanity is going through right now, because they took it for granted, they're having existential anxiety. Normally, I don't see existential anxiety other than when people are diagnosed to have a terminal cancer, or somebody in the family dies, or they're in extreme old age, facing infirmity, prospect of death. Nobody worries about existence. But now everybody is, because they took it for granted. So what we're experiencing is grief. Grief, when people go through grief, they lose something that they took for granted. That's what grief is. And so first they feel victimized. Why me? Well, it's not me, it's everyone right now. Then they go through anger and resentment, and then they go to frustration, and finally they resign and they feel helpless. But there's a moment, some people come to what is called acceptance. And when they do, they have peace. And then, only then, they seek meaning. So right now, we're at that stage. Some of us are seeking meaning. And if we actually get there, we can actually reinvent our body, we can resurrect our soul, and together we can make a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. And if we don't, then we'll go back to the insanity. For the moment, though, this COVID-19, which is just a piece of RNA. Basically, it's a piece of genetic material that's messing up the ecosystem. But what it has done very successfully is put humans back in their cages. So now we are in our cages and the ecosystem is repairing itself. The sky is clearer. You can see the stars at night. People can see the Himalayas from hundreds of miles away. The fish are returning to the lakes in Venice. Animals are coming back into the ecosystem, and you can breathe better, and you can see the stars. Something is happening. Nature is saying, let's keep these humans in their cages for a little bit, because when they come back, they're going to go back to their insanity. And that's probably what is going to happen. We're going to go back to our insanity, thinking we are the only species on this planet, separate from the ecosystem and not an expression of it. Or maybe we won't waste this pandemic. It's a huge opportunity for us to heal ourselves in a big way,
Yeah.
personally, socially, ecosystem, and even economically. We could create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. But we have to upgrade our level of awareness from our current insanity, which is, it is insane. I mean, human behavior has caused climate change, eco destruction, extinction of species, mechanized death, biological warfare, poison in the food chain, you name it. We are risking our extinction and we call it normal. This is the psychopathology of the average, which is basically totally insane. And if we don't agree, then we are declaring our own insanity.
And it's so interesting because the pursuit of peace, and from my understanding, and I've read almost everything of yours and been a student of it, and have tried to get back to center, started to meditate 13 years ago, changing my life from an insane one to being able to give meaning to everything that we see. And this meaning that we talk about also encompasses potential. Uh,
It
and
does. It
and
does.
it's a huge part of what I've learned from you. And I came up with my definition of happiness, which I define happiness as a virus. It's the most contagious virus of all time. You can spread it by witnessing it. It's so powerful, and it strengthens our immune system, so it fights off other viruses that may have detrimental effect on us. But potential, as I've read through your great teachings, is something that I enjoy, the consistent everyday, persistent without quit pursuit of my own potential, which is connected to everybody else's. Can you share with me, and I know it's a little selfish on my own podcast, but how you perceive potential in this circumstance, and what we should consistently and persistently pursue as a collective consciousness of potential?
So there are two ways of looking at reality. The current scientific way of looking at reality, which is very useful as a construct, the scientific story, is based on three assumptions which are actually not not valid. Current scientific paradigm and methodology is based on three assumptions which are not valid, and yet the scientific paradigm is very useful. It creates technology. You and I are having a conversation, and the world can watch this. It's all science. Take a plane, take a jet plane, go here, there. Everything we do today is a result of the scientific story. But the scientific story is based on three assumptions which may not be true. The first assumption is that the world is physical, that the ontological primitive of the universe is physical stuff, whether we call it particles or force fields or gravity, strong, weak interactions, but it is some form of matter. That's the basis of all science. And that's useful. We can do science, technology, develop pharmaceuticals, all that. Very useful, but not true, because if the world was made of matter, you can't explain consciousness or mind or choice or creativity or insight or inspiration or imagination or vision or purpose or meaning. None of that can be explained through the interaction of atoms and molecules and force fields. That's called the hard problem of consciousness, and everybody admits that that's a hard problem. But therefore, people are questioning, is the world physical or not? And those of us who are engaged in examining reality at a fundamental level don't think that the world is physical. In fact, if the world is presumed to be physical, then you can't explain a lot of things. Whether you say, oh, love is a virus, it changes epigenetic activity, it decreases inflammation, all of that is true. Yet, love is not a physical activity. It may have physical expressions and correlations and neural correlates and epigenetic correlates and biological correlates, but love it as an experience is not the interaction of molecules, number one, or any other experience that we have. So that's called the hard problem of consciousness. And science is unable to even address it because science is based on a philosophy which is called naive realism. Even Einstein and all these geniuses were naive realists. They actually did not have an idea of what fundamental reality is, except for a few. Niels Bohr and Schrödinger, these were different people. They had a different idea, even Max Planck. But the big giants of science today are physicalists. They're naive realists. So that's one assumption that is questionable. The second assumption of science, which is questionable, is the science is based on subject-object split. There's me and there's the rest of the universe. So I am separate from everything else, which is obviously not true. Our biological expression is an expression of the total universe. So subject-object split doesn't hold true either, okay? And then the third thing that science is based on, which is very interesting, is in a sense the idea that our perceptual activities, which are species specific. This is a difficult point for most people to understand because we rely on what is called empirical facts. Okay, and we are very proud of that. Empirical fact. Show me the proof. Show me the empirical fact. What's an empirical fact is a species specific experience in human consciousness using a human brain. So the empirical fact is actually a construct based on how we do the experiment, the questions we ask. As Heisenberg said, nature never reveals herself to us as she is, but as exposed to our methods of questioning. I would say not only as exposed to methods of questioning, but also the experiments that are done based on those methods of questioning. So what we see called empirical facts are a blip of an activity in an ocean of activities based on the questions we ask and the experiments we set up, and then we call it objective reality. Actually, it's not. It's a construct. And yet, these are useful constructs, right? These are useful. But if we want to actually understand reality, we can say naive realism is very useful for doing science and technology, but not in figuring out who you are or what you are. Unless you know who you are, what is the meaning and purpose of my existence, why do I exist, how do I know I exist, then you haven't even started exploring potential, because scientific stories are coming from consciousness. Mythical stories are coming from consciousness. Religious stories are coming from consciousness. What is consciousness? Unless we actually go there, we will not know how we construct meaning, context, relationship, and story, which is what our life is. You are your story. To be human is to have a story. But what is reality behind the story? Unless we address that, we will never figure it out, the meaning of our existence. So that is crucial to me right now. You say, what is potential? Potential is infinite. It's the immeasurable potential of all that exists, all that has ever existed, all that will ever exist. Even when we do today, we do experiments like watch the cosmic wave background of the early universe. We are constructing right now, based on that particular observation, based on that particular methodology, telescope, Hubble or whatever, James Watson in the biosphere, based on that, based on questions, we are constructing the entire history of the universe, Big Bang, this, that, the other. It's our creation. We are constructing the history of the universe right now. That is our potential as human beings. And ultimately, when we recognize how we construct reality, because all we experience is perception, sensations, images, feelings, thoughts, the rest is a story, scientific, religious, whatever. Once we understand how we construct reality, including what we call the history of the universe, we realize there are actually infinite versions of that. infinite versions even of that story. And that's where science is going. Multiverses, multi-worlds, etc. There could be infinite versions of David right now in many universes, and probably there are. So when we say what is potential, it's unimaginable, it's inconceivable, because it's infinite. The infinite cannot be imagined. As soon as you imagine it, you compromise it. Okay, so you cannot imagine, conceive, conceptualize, uh, uh, visualize your potential, because it is what is doing the visualization. It is what is doing the imagination. And there is no limit to that. Tell me, is there a limit to the number of images you can construct in consciousness, or number of thoughts, or number of feelings, or number of perceptions, or number of ideas, or number of stories, or number of relationships or contexts? There's no limit. And by no limit means infinite, and infinite cannot be compromised. That is potential.
That's amazing. And one of the blessings of having you on the Playbook is in the 87%, it exists at maybe a lower vibration or awareness. It's very important to me to share the ideas of my mentors, people like you. And Gotham feels the same way. And I was so impressed. I watched the Now for Tomorrow on sleep, which I study sleep. I have a sleep mentor. It's a huge component of my human experience that I'm having to clear what I call those clouds of what I'm already connected to through my sleep, and elevate and escalate, plateau and grow while I sleep, instead of the myth of Sisyphus pulling a boulder up the hill just in the morning to have it be at the bottom of the hill again. But it's important. There's all these different formats today, and you're doing Now for Tomorrow for 8 minutes. And, whether it's the Bob Proctors of the world or the Deepak Chopras of the world, I think it's important that you have transcended the platforms to be able to concisely help people at least plant seeds, as Dennis Waitley taught me when I was young, plant seeds under trees that you'll never sit under. You're Now for Tomorrow, to me, is Deepak Chopra planting seeds under trees that he'll never sit under.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned sleep. Sleep is the closest thing, by the way, to pure potentiality, because the contents of conscious awareness are gone. And there's the proliferation of ambiguity, paradox, uncertainty, contradiction, which you need for creativity. So sleep is your entry point to ultimate creativity, which only happens after death.
I love that. Last issue real quickly. I've been studying with Blaine Bartlett, one of our friends, time. And, when I use time as a crucial variable in my existence, because I want to turn it from the horizontal into the vertical, into a context of infinity. But I feel that people don't study time. They don't spend enough attention and intention on time to give themselves peace. And I really think that time is a great variable that allows us to live in peace and to learn more and to create and live in neutral or be at center more often. Can you just touch on time real briefly as far as that capability?
Yes, so time is a human construct. It doesn't actually exist. All that exists is an eternal timeless now, and the eternal timeless now is not a moment in time. The eternal timeless now modifies itself into both the past and the present. So the choices you're making right this now, and right now doesn't mean this moment. Right now is here and now, in which the moment is an experience, a perceptual cognitive experience. So the choices you're making right now are determining the past and the future. So you think of a ship, for example, and it's heading towards a port. So you know where it's going, that's the future. But it's also leaving a trail of where it's been. Your present moment choices are creating the timeline that we call past and future, in a timeline which is peculiarly human. Okay, because you don't know the timeline of an insect with 100 eyes, or a butterfly that smells the world through its antenna and tastes the world through its legs and hears the world through its wings and sees the world through 30,000 eyes. You have no idea what that experience is. So the human experience, linear, even though it seems from past, present to future, is actually a timeless now presence of being, which is not in time whatsoever. The past and future are constructed in imagination as as constructs that give meaning to what I call entangled qualia, qualities of experience. So if I show you what is this, you'll say it's a notebook. What is this? It's a hand. But actually, before you can say that, it's a color. Okay, and this is also a shape in the color. The word hand and the word book is a meaning construct that takes shapes and colors that are entangled, and you create the objective idea of a book. But actually, it's a color, shape, and form in your awareness, which is timeless. The experience is in time. So, experience is in time, you are never in time. And therefore, theoretically, you're free. You're totally free to construct any reality, any time, in any moment of now, past, present, and future. Because even the past of the universe is one timeline out of many timelines based on how we are giving meaning, context, relationship, and story to our present moment experiences, which are happening here and now in timeless being, infinite being.
This podcast better be the one podcast out of the hundreds that I've done that is rewatched and rewatched.
Okay.
Last thing, real quickly, Gotham told me the best piece of advice or lesson that you've ever given him was one that I heard from Xander's and Wayne Dyer, which is what he calls rule number 6, right? Don't take yourself so goddamn seriously.
That is it, because it's just one story out of infinite stories.
Is there another piece of advice or lesson from your journey so far that you could share with us before we let you go?
The only thing I can say is let's start slowly dismantling our habitual certainties and patterns of thinking, because no one knows why there's existence. No one knows why there's awareness of existence. So as the great poet Rumi said, exchange your cleverness for bewilderment. Once you're bewildered, you will be humble. And once you're humble, you will ask the right questions. And if you live those questions, maybe you'll be surprised and wonderstruck and full of awe at the very fact that you exist. And if you're not, then your humanity is incomplete. Make your humanity complete right now by being confused, bewildered, wonderstruck, full of awe, humility for the sanctity and sacredness of existence, everyone's existence.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being an icon for radical humility, full of love, light, and lessons. I will always be grateful for you. I can't wait till this is all over so I can give you a physical hug.
Yes, sir.
I got the legendary Deepak Chopra, the radically humble, with David Meltzer, a student of his learnings, Entrepreneurs, the Playbook.